And the representative of INEC chairman had been very clear that there are many issues. Then whether there had been effective solutions, maybe the discussants will tell us. Now, the position I have taken in this speech is not to take very personal positions, because I know we have very brilliant discussants that will dissect everything and maybe take judgmental positions. So I simply tried to raise the issues, then I'll leave the discussants to dissect the issues and tell us more about what the solutions will be. So I am extremely delighted to be invited by IPAC to present this keynote address. And the theme, the title of my speech is The Imperative of Nigeria Political Stability, Issues and Solutions. By documenting Nigerians' experiences in political party formation, evolution, and management in the last 100 years, I believe IPAC has demonstrated leadership and commitment to helping to find solutions to the nagging problem of political stability in our dear country. This is a worthy contribution to our collective effort at sanitizing our politics, strengthening our political structures and institutions, deepening participatory democracy, and building an inclusive, peaceful, cohesive, and prosperous Nigeria of our dream. I therefore thank the leadership of IPAC most profoundly for this outstanding national service, as I hereby welcome all of you to this presentation. As keynote speaker, I shall provoke debates and allow the discussants to figure out the answers and the way forward. And I do not plan to take much of your time about definitions of the terms, but maybe I will simply mention the key words in the theme, in the topic I am to present. One, imperative. Imperative simply in this context means compelling, necessary, needful. Politics in this context will refer to a framework for making policies for the governance of a social entity. The framework includes the totality of institutions, rules, and processes through which a country is governed. Nigeria, of course, will mean a sovereign geopolitical entity called Nigeria. Some will call it a country, some will call it a nation, but we will see the difference as we go down. Stable or stability means steady, means progressive, consistent, and so on. Again, for further clarification, I need to explain the difference between a country and a nation, and possibly a nation state. A country refers to a sovereign geopolitical entity with its own government and boundaries. Under international law, a country is also called a state, or referred to as a state. Then a nation refers to a group of people who share common history, common culture or tradition, common language, often common ancestry, and maybe of a definite geographic region, or even spread beyond a particular geographic region. And that is why in Nigeria, though Nigeria is a country, you have many ethnic nationalities in Nigeria. You have the Igbo nation, the Ijaw nation, the Yoruba nation, the Hausa nation, the Fulani nation. So within a country, you have various nationalities. Now, a nation state is a country that has been able to weld into one national aspiration, all the various nationalities that are there in content. So it's not the same that, it's not automatic that once you have a country, it becomes a nation. You have to build that country into a nation state. And so nation building starts from the time you formed the country. And I needed to make this clarification so that as I go on, you'll be able to understand the positions I am taking. A nation state refers to countries that are able to successfully create a nation out of its population. So I'm going to contend in this paper that we have formed a country, but we have not been able to build it into a nation state. And I think that is why we have the instability we are talking about today. And I will contend in this paper that the core of our political challenges, or if you like, political instability we have today, is our inability to successfully build or galvanize the various nationalities within Nigeria into one common national consciousness. So this is to say that it is only countries that have successfully midwifed its diverse population into a common national aspiration and interest through systems and structures that engender general sense of belonging, which inspires national consciousness, patriotism, and pride that are qualified to be called a nation. So it's just, you are not automatically a nation because you are a country. I am to say at this juncture that it is simpler to come together to form a country, but to build it into a nation is a much more difficult task. And that is what we are grappling with in Nigeria today, and that is why we have the instability we are talking about. It is only a country that has evolved into a nation that is usually politically stable. So if we are worried about our instability, it's because there is a gap in our nation-building process. In our own particular case in Nigeria, there is no gainsaying that we formed a country, but not yet able to build it into a nation. This instability of the inability of our successive leaders to build our country into a nation state is at the core of our political challenges, or if you like, political instability. I shall canvass in this presentation that there are two main factors that have constrained our efforts in nation building. One, fear of domination among the various ethnic groups. Two, mutual distrust among the various ethnic groups. This will run through my presentations, these two major reasons. These two factors makes it impossible to inspire patriotism, without which there cannot be nation building. In other multi-ethnic countries like ours that have made better progress at nation building, these two factors had been overcome through systems and institutions of government, among which are democracy, federalism, constitutionalism or rule of law, leadership, which I can call an intangible national asset, but very, very potent. These systems work in different variants in many countries, but nevertheless have yielded great results in most countries. In this presentation, we shall examine the gallant efforts of our founding fathers in deploying these systems and institutions to build a nation state. But why it has not worked in our country shall be the lot of the discussants to explain. I must, however, mention that many believe that leadership is central to our failures, while others hold the view that military incursion into politics truncated the progress being made. In my view, the solution to the challenge of building a nation state lies in the emergence of a skillful, visionary, and sacrificial nation builder as the leader of that country, and his commitment to devising effective strategies to manage the complexities of the country's diversity. When we get there, we'll be stable. Having provided above clarifications, permit me therefore to go into the meat of my presentation, which will include, I will start with the imperatives. What are the reasons why Nigeria must be politically stable? The core of this presentation is to highlight the imperatives of the political stability of Nigeria. I hold that it is not only needful, but it is absolutely necessary for Nigeria's administration to be stable for the following reasons. One, having formed Nigeria with a defined aspiration, it is imperative to consolidate the country as one indivisible entity and collectively build it to the dream of the founding fathers, i.e., to become a strong, united, and prosperous nation. Two, having formed Nigeria out of a diverse population, it is imperative to strengthen national cohesion among the component units, promote national interest, and de-emphasize ethnic interests. 3, having formed Nigeria as a sovereign political entity, it is imperative to stabilize Nigeria as a democratic nation where peace and justice reign, rule of law is supreme, and power belongs to the people. I need not emphasize that any system or organization that does not promote justice and fairness will neither have peace nor progress. 4, having formed Nigeria based on liberal economic ideology, it is imperative to stabilize Nigeria as a growing national economy where national infrastructure shall support development and entrepreneurship. 5, having formed Nigeria within the precinct of accountable governance, it is imperative to guarantee the welfare and security of lives and property of the citizens. 6, having formed Nigeria with the hope of building it to a nation state, it is imperative that the system, the structure, and the programs of government must engender that sense of belonging that inspires patriotism and national pride. I must add that an unstable polity weakens the authority of government and constrains its ability to guarantee security and development. Political instability, therefore, not only diminishes the essence of nationhood, but also defeats the purpose of government. Finally, having formed Nigeria as a sovereign state, it is imperative that the nation positions and projects itself well enough to earn the respect of the international community. And when you consider these 7 items, you will find out that it is not, we have no alternative to making sure that we stabilize Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, you can agree with me that the need for a stable Nigeria is dire and inescapable. We can no longer continue to experiment with the lives and future of our citizens. We can no longer blame the colonial masters after 64 years of independence. We shall not allow the labors of our heroes past to be in vain. And let me assure you, having founded this country as an independent political entity, no foreign power or friend will come here to help us stabilize it or build it to a nation of our dream. The responsibility is ours, and I dare say the burden is on this generation. If I may borrow the words of General Yakubu Gowon, this is the task that must be accomplished. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, let us record the labors of our heroes past, i.e. Habam Macaulay, Chief Ernest Ikoli, Mr. H.O. Davis, and other nationalists who fought for our independence. Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Sir Ahmadu Bello, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, and Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, who negotiated the Lancaster House Agreement and took up the mantle of leadership to set up the first indigenous government in our country. Dr. Alex Ekweme, Alhaji Abubakar Rimi, Malam Adamu Shiroma, Chief Solomon La, Chief Bola Ige, Professor Jerry Gana, and so on, who restored power from the military. May I crave your indulgence to rise for a 1-minute silence in their honor. Among the founding fathers, this was not unexpected, given the differences in culture, religion, and language. What is unfortunate, however, is that the intergroup suspicion have morphed into mutual distrust and spite, which instead of abating, have dramatically grown over the years to completely drown our national interest. It is my belief that every other factor that has affected the progress and stability of our country derives from our inability to effectively manage our plural composition and lift national consciousness over and above ethnic interests. It does not require any special wisdom to note that without overcoming mutual suspicion and distrust, we shall remain unable to collectively commit to building one nation for all, where systems, structures, and programs of government engender a general sense of belonging, which in turn inspires national consciousness, patriotism, and pride. I am therefore compelled to state clearly that no nation has progressed on a sprawling foundation of mutual suspicion or crisis of confidence among her component units. The Nigerian journey to nationhood has been one of a struggle to manage our differences under a system that offers confidence and accommodation to all. I therefore consider it needful to provide a few insights on this journey. The presentation hereunder is not about history, but to appreciate our present condition. Therefore, we do need to trace the contending issues in the making of Nigeria and the solutions sought in the time past. So I'll categorize the presentation going forward into two: the issues and the solutions that were presented before independence, then the issues and the solutions that were used to address those issues after independence. So let me start one before independence. Colonial administration never attempted to apply one single administrative system or structure over Nigeria. Before the amalgamation, the North and Southern protectorates were separately administered, and after amalgamation, the system of indirect rule was applied in the North, while direct rule was applied in the South. Even by 1922, when Hugh Clifford's constitution came into being, it created two different legislative and executive councils for South and Northern protectorates, as if the amalgamation has not happened. By these different administrative systems, the colonial masters avoided the challenge of ethnic rivalry, ethnic tension, and contentions. But this was short-lived when by 1944, the Richards Constitution created the Central Legislative Council in Lagos to legislate for the whole country. According to Ambassador Jacko in his book, he said, the mostly southern nationalist agitators rejected the Constitution on the ground that the Central Council membership favored the North over the South. They accused the colonial government of seeking to establish a northern hegemony or domination of the country. I must say at this point that this rejection blew open the crisis of confidence and mutual suspicion that trailed from the beginning of effort to form Nigeria as a country. I hope we are following. So importantly, when the two protectorates were administered separately, there was no issue. But immediately Richard Constitution tried to bring everybody together under a legislative system. Then the issue of who is dominating the other now came quite open. Now, when this issue arose, what did the colonial masters do? Look at what they did. Solution. The objection to the composition of the membership of the Central Legislature and the growing demand by the nationalist agitators that the indigenous people of Nigeria need to be consulted in making any decision concerning the administration of the country led to the first All-Nigerian Constitutional Conference of January 1950 and subsequently gave rise to the Macpherson Constitution. At that conference, which drew participants from across the country, the system and structure of administration acceptable to the three blocks were negotiated and agreed. And the basic feature of that negotiation, which formed the Macpherson Constitution, were three. One, that a democratic system of government patterned after the Westminster Parliamentary Order should be adopted. That a federation of three regional blocks, the North, the East, and the West, should be adopted. And that the regions shall have greater regional autonomy, and so on. So the three blocks agreed that this is the structure of government that can guarantee the progress of the country. And it now formed the 1950 Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, you can agree with me that the three main pillars that formed the foundation of many successful multi-ethnic nations, i.e. democracy, constitutionalism, and federalism, were not lost on our founding fathers. Accordingly, they were adopted at the foundation of Nigeria. So this was the solution which addressed the concern then. Now, the second issue I want to raise is the Kanu riot of 1953. So the above resolution of the 1950 conference formed the basis of the 1951 John Macpherson Constitution. As a matter of fact, rather than cure the problems of mutual suspicion, implementation of the Macpherson Constitution generated unimaginable disagreement between the South and the North on the composition of the federal government. While the crisis of confidence was yet to be resolved, Chief Anthony Enahoro of Action Group moved a motion for self-rule by 1956. Immediately, Sir Ahmadu Bello, leader of the NPC, also submitted a counter motion on the grounds that there were many issues that are yet to be resolved about the union, and so the North was not ready to go for independence. And this was the reason why Nigeria did not get independence by 1956. So with the counter motion by Ahmadu Bello, then they had to go down to resolve the issues before they can make progress. So that disagreement deepened the North-South divide. But even as tension grew, the leadership of the Action Group chose to visit Kanu to address their party faithfuls. The supporters of NPC responded with aggressive protest that turned violent and claimed many lives. Following these events, the North issued an 8-point demand as conditions to continue in the Federation. Some of those demands, some of their key demands to remain in the Union were as follows. 1, that complete regional legislative and executive autonomy except for defense, external affairs, customs, West African research institutions. 2, no central legislative or executive policy-making body for the whole country. 3, no central agency for all the regions or regional issues, and so on. And what the North is saying is that, look, as it is now, we cannot be part of this Nigeria, except if these demands were addressed. Are you getting me as we are following? So what did the colonial masters do to resolve these issues? Solution. The colonial administration reconvened another conference in London in 1953. It spilled over to 1954. During the conference, far-reaching compromises were made by all sides, and the resolutions at the conference formed the basis of the Littleton Constitution of 1954, which includes the following. It granted real lawmaking powers to the regional legislature, recognized the position of premiers in the regions, recognized Lagos as the federal capital territory, rejected the right of regions to secede as proposed by the Action Group. It introduced revenue allocation formula based on derivation. So after all this we agreed in the 54 Constitution, then peace again returned. And the two protectorates now, the two regions now agreed that they could move into independence and stay under one country. But that was not all. As it appeared as if the three blocs had agreed, the minority question arose. So the third issue that arose, which I will address, is the minority question. As the nation geared up to independence following the apparent agreement among the three ethnic blocs, agitations by minority tribes across the country for separate regions of their own became too loud to ignore. The minorities feared domination, marginalization, and neglect by the majority blocs if left subsumed within the regions they control. So when the colonial administration could not go forward with independence, they now had to address the minority question. What did they do? In response, the colonial administration set up a commission of inquiry headed by Mr. George Harry Willings to look into the affairs of the minority tribes. The commission, which submitted this report in 1957, confirmed that the fears of the minorities were real, but instead of new regions, it recommended the inclusion of fundamental human rights chapter in the Constitution as an adequate safeguard. That was how the fundamental human rights chapter came into our Constitution in the first place. In concluding the history of our bumpy journey before independence, it is important to note from the events preceding independence that there appear not to be any conscious effort by our founding fathers to deny or wish away our ethnic differences. Rather, they devised solutions that should resolve the challenge. I believe they were on the right path and would have made steady progress, but for the unfortunate military interruption. This challenge of mutual suspicion and distrust, driven on the one hand by fear of domination and on the other hand by fear of secession, is still haunting the nation till today. The presumed solutions, that is democracy, federalism, regional autonomy, and so on, appear not to have provided any concrete and lasting antidote to the issues of national incoherence and mutual suspicion. I just raised these three issues before independence and the solutions adopted to resolve them before independence. But I can say that there were a number of other issues, but these were key issues that were resolved centrally at the constitution level. So let us look at eventually when the fears of the minorities were addressed, Nigeria was able to now go for independence in 1960. So after independence, what happened? Did the independence or the agreement to stay together under the solutions earlier provided solve the problem? It appears no. So let's take a quick look for a roundup on what has happened since independence. So that we achieved independence in 1960. But by 1966, while the young independent nation was still trying to master the art of political administration in a federation haunted by trust deficit and growing mutual suspicion, idealistic young army officers disrupted the civilian administration in a bloody coup d'etat. Again, I agree with Ambassador Jacob, who described the coup in the following words. He said, the fact that the coup happened at all was in itself fully of truly monumental proportion. There was no reason under the sun for that coup to happen. There was no explanation to it. In fact, if you ask me, I will simply say it's just the exuberance of young boys who found themselves in positions having guns. And maybe at that time, across the African continent, the issue of coup was beginning to crop up here and there, and they thought they could experiment that in Nigeria. There was no reason whatsoever. Maybe we would have consolidated our march to nationhood if that coup never happened. Now, so the coup, which was obviously seen from an ethnic prism, was countered, and the ensuing events led to a bloody 30-month civil war that ended with the enthronement of military rule over Nigeria. And you can agree with me that that's where the journey started to go from worse to worse. Now, what did the military do to stabilize the administration of Nigeria? In their own wisdom, in order to preserve the Nigerian Union, the military regime dismantled the regional structures and imposed unitary system of government. Even though they retained the name Federal Republic following the division of the country into 12 states as federating units in 1967, the states become incrementally more appendages of the now super powerful central government. The idea behind the creation of states was largely not only to dismantle the regional autonomies, but to ensure that no region would have the political compactness and economic muscle to break away or declare secession. So in their own wisdom, to have a stronger central government was the only solution that can keep the country together. But you find out that it didn't stabilize the polity. So, but it was a complete revision of what was agreed at the foundation. What the military did was a complete revision of that. So it didn't solve the problem. Even under the military, the stability of the country was still very bumpy. So let me also take through quickly further search for solutions by successive military regime. Of course, you know that in 1966, immediately the coup of 66 happened. They empaneled a study group to study the best constitution for Nigeria, But of course, the counter coup did not allow the study group to do much. So they were wiped out. Then eventually, so it is the polity of Nigeria. The political bureau carried out a whole lot of effort, came up with a report, it didn't solve any much problem. But one thing that is very important to note about Babangida's regime was that despite the brilliant efforts made, his regime was bogged down by suspicions of coup and counter-coups. And one of the most prominent of the coups that came up then was the Gideon Oka coup. And Gideon Oka coup, okay, let me put it this way. Series of coups attempts dogged Babangida's government. The most notorious being the Major Gideon Oka coup of 1990. It exposed the deep-rooted inter-ethnic distrust in the north, as Major Oka announced the expulsion of the far northern Hausa Fulani-dominated states from the Federation for seeking to dominate the rest of the country. According to Oka, General Babangida for that. So, in responding, when General Oka's coup failed, General Babangida's government still thought that maybe they needed to decentralize the country. That is why that's when we could have stability. So he went ahead and created additional 18 states. But it didn't solve any problem. More demands for state creation also continued. So at no point had the politics of the country been stable. All efforts, particularly under the ministry, it didn't guarantee any stability. In an effort to reduce tension caused by political rivalry and all that, General Babangida experimented a two-party system and eventually conducted the 1993 election. Well, eventually, election was conducted. Apparently, Abiola was to become winner, and it was annulled. And this created another tension in the country that gave rise to Nadeko, G34, and all that. So as this was on and the country was again impossible to be stable, General Babangida put in place the interim national government. The interim national government could not last more than 3 months. General Abacha ran it out and came in. But General Abacha is very remarkable in our history because General Abacha set up a constitutional conference. And the conference set up by General Abacha made these far-reaching recommendations. So part of the recommendations of the General Abacha Constitution was, 1, rotational presidency between the North and the South, restoration of multi-party system, provision of 3 vice presidents, creation of a constitutional court and an electoral court, division of the country into 6 geopolitical zones. Of course, eventually you know that subsequently General Abacha died, and more problems and all that continued. So when General Abacha died, then General Abu Salami sets in. And in apparent patriotic disposition, General Abu Salami was in a hurry to hand over to restore civilian regime. I think that I haven't seen, somebody made allusion to that. I have never seen such level of patriotism ever before in Nigeria. Within 1 year, he was able to run a transition program and restore the civilian regime. And I can say today that General Abdul Salami is the father of the 4th Republic in Nigeria. Well, the only strange thing about General Abdul Salami's regime was that instead of promulgating the constitution, the report of the conference, Abacha's conference, the provisional military government left the Abacha's conference report and merely adopted the 1979 Constitution. And of course, that is why the 1979 Constitution is almost the same like that of 99 Constitution. So the issue of rotation, the issue of all those that are recommended by Abacha were not actually integrated. But civilian regime, civilian administration restored. Well, eventually the country wobbled up, and in 2006, because of course General Abacha's, General Abdulsalami's administration brought in President Obasanjo. In 2006, General Obasanjo also set up another constitutional conference to review again the political structure and system for Nigeria. But for the anticipated third term agenda, the report of that conference was aborted. So it was stillborn, and nothing came out of it. Apparently, President Goodluck Jonathan also in 2014 set up a constitutional conference. And it was very extensive, and it came up with much robust reports. But he was not able to push it further before he left office. And when President Buhari came, President Buhari archived it. And that is the last effort made in negotiating our structure that can stabilize our nation. So in conclusion, I'm just trying to. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, this presentation has attempted to exhume from the womb of history the issues surrounding political stability or lack thereof in our country, Nigeria, and of course the efforts made by each generation of leaders to resolve them. I hope you will all agree that it is the issue of mutual suspicion and distrust among the component ethnic and sectarian groups that have dogged the country from the moment of the 1914 amalgamation through the 46th year of colonialism, the First Republic 1960 to 66, the interregnum of protracted military rule up to the present democratic dispensation. We have noted how these mutual antagonisms are driven by deep-rooted fear on all sides of domination and or secession by one region or ethnic group. I will now leave it to the discussants to peruse through the early and later efforts at constitution making, from the introduction of democracy, federalism, regional government, creation of states, human rights, federal character, to zoning, rotation, presidency, and so on, to determine how and why measures that have worked relatively well in other plural countries have so far failed in Nigeria. It is quite clear, however, that the founding fathers had demonstrated a deep commitment to lay a solid constitutional foundation for Nigeria to grow and develop into a strong, stable, self-reliant, and prosperous nation. Could it be that their efforts were not deep enough or not tried long enough to sustain and reach maturation? Furthermore, given the serial failures of numerous constitutional conferences under military rule, questions are justified as to whether the military rulers were genuinely seeking for solutions to national instability, or they were naively seeking to impose national unity by fiat of decrees. In fact, some analysts have suggested that they were mostly interested in trying to legitimize their incursion into politics and to justify the undeniable huge negative impact they had made on Nigerians' present condition in terms of constitutional structure, system, and strength of our governance. Finally, the point needs to be made that besides the stillborn Constitutional Conference of 2006 and that of 2014, no other structured effort has been made in a decade to resolve the ever-lingering issues of instability in the Nigerian polity. This, in my candid view, is at the root of the lingering problems of national instability leading to high-level insecurity, economic regression, the heavy burden of maladministration, and so on. I will therefore conclude by noting with serious emphasis the incontrovertible fact that in any heterogeneous or plural country of similar complexity as Nigeria, the need for national dialogue and minimum consensus on the terms of the Union cannot be ignored or overemphasized. It behoves this generation of leaders and elites to establish that dialogue and reach that consensus that Nigeria sorely needs to rid itself and her component parts of the mutual suspicion, distrust, and antagonism that have retarded her growth into the stable nation and contending global power she has every potential to be. I thank you all.